I am really glad to be here. This has really been an interesting few years for us. Some of you who have heard me speak before may remember that I was warning the industry a few years ago about using the term artificial intelligence. And the reason that I was doing that is because we weren't doing artificial intelligence at that point. We were doing machine learning. We were doing deep learning and really looking at how to do data analytics and trying to figure a lot of that stuff out. A lot of what we were doing was automation. And those of you who have been in the business for a while, you know that automation has been around quite some time. Automation has been within the radio business since the early 1970s. It became a part of the broadcast systems around the late 70s to early 80s. So automation has been here, and the idea of that, that's what we were doing. Fast forward to 4 years, we've seen that generative AI is really what is happening right now, and so there's a lot of discussion around that. One of the things that I think is important as we start to talk about this is that we understand the foundation, we understand the infrastructure, and we understand where our place is within all of this. And as we know, engineers are the foundational structure builders. We're the architects. We're the ones who are also responsible for supporting all the crazy stuff we built. So when I think about where we are with artificial intelligence, I think of it pretty much like this. We're at the toddler stage. Okay, and if any of you are parents, you understand what that means as a toddler. 1 minute the toddler can be really, really awesome and you love them and you figure out that God made them cute so that you don't kill them when they're babies. And then the other time, you really kind of go, oh my gosh, can I put this thing outside and let it play by itself? That's where we are right now. There's a lot of understanding, there's a fear, there's excitement, there's all of these wonderful things that are happening in the space, but we've got to put some structure around it. And that's where engineering comes into place. We provide structure, we provide tools, we provide solutions, and we also really work towards providing an easy path if possible. So how many of you feel like this when it comes to how much is happening within the space of artificial intelligence? What's happening as we get bombarded daily with all of these different things that are happening, all of these applications, all of the different things that people say that they want to do, and all the things that we hear this technology is capable of doing? How many? This is an interactive conversation. So how many people kind of feel like, like you're getting a little overwhelmed? I spend 4 hours every day, and this is 4 hours every day doing research on what's happening and staying in front of what's going on in the industry, but not just in our industry of media and entertainment. Because the thing about this is that it is going to hit every part of our lives. And the funnier thing about it is that it already has in certain degrees. Siri came in years ago, and people were like, oh my gosh, oh, AI, oh, it's already here. Predictive AI was a big part of what we were doing. So, today we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about some of the new tools that are in front of us. We're going to talk about the new opportunities, because I think it's important for us to look forward and understand where we actually have a play in what's actually being built. And the next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to do a little thing I like to call lessons in creative technology design. Because if you went to university, most of your time was spent on mathematics and engineering if you are an engineer. If you are an electrical engineer, you were definitely in a lot of mathematics and a lot of electrical engineering, but you weren't spending as much time on design. Mechanical engineer here, we spent a lot of time on design, but we also had to understand what we're building and who we're building it for. I think it's important for us to talk about a different way of thinking about design and a different way of thinking about how we institute and integrate some of these things into what we do. So innovation. What drives innovation? Anybody want to yell out some things? What do you think drives innovation? Well, money definitely drives innovation. What was that? Ideas, yeah. Problems. There you go. Yeah, lots of things. Yeah, necessity. All the things that well, money's not necessarily a necessity. Well, yeah, it's a necessity. But essentially what we're saying is necessity. Necessity, we've all heard that. Mother of invention. Necessity drives innovation. But what's really driving a lot of innovation today is fear. How many of you have either read or heard or everyone talking about how AI is going to destroy life as it is today? It's going to destroy our industry. It's going to take away jobs. It's going to do all of these things. We have all heard and read and seen, and we witnessed sort of a pause in our industry, at least if you're on the film side like I am. You witnessed a pause in our industry last year that was focused on, hey, we need to understand what this is going to do, and we need to understand how this is going to play in our space. And by the way, we are extremely fearful that this is going to take our job. If you're a writer, if you were concerned about ChatGPT and all of these other things that are generating, scripts and things of that nature. So fear started to get people to think, how do we do this? How do we get involved a little bit more than just sitting back and waiting for someone else to actually come up with our solution or come up with our path forward. Another thing that drives innovation is requests and demands. If you come from the post-production world, and you can see from my bio that, I spent a lot of time, as one of the trolls that worked late nights in the lab, in the edit suite, being in the dark and doing all of these kinds of things. We often had to come up with a solution at the last minute for the increasing demands and requests that were coming from our production teams. That is another thing that drives innovation. Whether or not you are figuring out where you're going to go, or you're figuring out how to get that producer out of your room so that you can actually be creative and actually get the work done, you come up with ways to make things happen. So, the other thing is exhaustion. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of hearing people talk about AI as if it is a sentient being and that it is thinking on its own. AI is nothing more than statistics, mathematics, and probability. That is it. And it requires humans to actually decide what it is going to do and what will be the generated outcome. Now, you can build models with as little as 50 lines of code, and that model may be specific to a certain thing, but the basis of what it is doing is nothing more than mathematics, statistics, and probability. It is not a sentient being. We are not at AGI at this point. However, that is where individuals want to go, and we'll see how close we get and what we need to put around that. And then in all of us, there is the urge to evolve. Every one of us never, if you're an engineer and you're working on anything, you never believe that it's done. How many of us have those projects that it's out there, it's working, the company's satisfied with it, but you're not? And you want to get more budget just so that you can make it better because you know that it can be better, and they're like, it's good enough. We don't stop evolving. We don't stop that desire in us to continue to improve and to make things better. And that's what makes us engineers, to be honest. That's what taught us from the first time that we said, hey, I do believe that I can fit this square block into this round hole. I just have to figure out how to do it. When we were in primary school, they were telling us, no, you're weird. Why are you trying to put that block in that hole? Because I believe that I can do it. And that's what drives us as engineers, and that's also what drives innovation. So, this is the baby that if any of you have read any of my speeches or you heard anything that I've been talking about for probably the last 6 months, this baby has become quite popular. And it is my way of illustrating what we are doing right now and where we actually are and when the toddler gets a little bit out of control. So when you think about what you see in front of you, this is what people think that we're doing with AI. They believe that AI is actually managing it itself. They believe that AI is actually doing a lot of the work, doing a lot of the advancement, and all of these types of things, and no one is in control, and the baby has just gone wild. That is in no way what we actually have going on in our industry right now. And when we peel back a little bit of what we've seen and the layers of what's happening in this industry, we realize that there is a lot of work and a lot of hard work and advancement going into taking the data, forming that data, and actually then generating out information. Now, the generation, of course, is coming with what we'll see as new jobs, such as prompt engineers and so forth. That is then driving where we actually go. It is not this crazy baby. So what are the new tools and the new opportunities that we have in front of us? So, a few years ago, this was not part of our daily lexicon. Today, you're going to hear somebody use one of these terms at least once a day. At least once a day. And the one that strikes the most fear in everybody is generative AI. And generative AI strikes the most fear partly because people actually believe that this is what they're going to be looking at. Now, usually this is the time when, and by the way, this is an image of T3000. This was the chatbot that I built early on when ChatGPT kind of opened the door for us to do things. And generally in here I do this little cheesy thing where I hit the button and it starts talking, and we have a conversation and all these kinds of things. And in a sense, the questions that it's asking is, why do people fear me? And I asked that question of GPT, why do people fear artificial intelligence? And the answer came back, very short sentence, I'm misunderstood. Which I thought, okay. That was like GPT 2.5, I think, that I was using at that point. And it just came back with, I'm misunderstood. And I think that's actually a telling thing. And it's up to us to educate our industry and educate ourselves. Because the most dangerous thing that we can have is uneducated people making decisions about how this technology is going to be integrated and how this technology is going to be used and where we actually advance this technology. Now, I've gone on record by saying that I think we need to pay a little bit more attention to the other AI, which doesn't get a lot of the press, doesn't get a lot of the excitement, but it's probably far more powerful than generative AI. How many of you have financial advisors? I hope you all do. If you don't, you probably need to get one. That's just a dad advice. Dad advice. Get in there. And the reason I ask that question is because most of us used to think like, wow, my financial advisor is so freaking smart. They are so awesome. They just know how to kind of get this stuff together. No, they were using predictive AI years ago. Remember, mathematics, probability, statistics. This is the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal right now. And when you think about that, like I said, I've gone on record to say that if you give me enough data about a company, its performance, what's been successful, what has not been successful, where they have made enough money, where they have not, where they've lost. If you give me that data, you give me time and a few other components, I can build you an algorithm that will predict what your company is going to do better than any CFO. Now, that is what I believe, and it's not only what I believe, it's what the London School of Economics has recently proven. That predictive AI is now more consistent and more trustworthy and more able to predict financial outcomes better than a single human being. Now, what does that mean to a bunch of engineers who are building for media and entertainment? That means that if we're working on a supply chain or production pipeline that is meant to figure out how to predict what's going to be the next big hit, what's going to actually resonate with audiences, how do we understand how they engage with content? That's where predictive AI will allow us to understand what we need to build, what kind of tools we need to build, and where we need to start deciding our design and architecture ideas. So we're back to this. This is another one. This is our little robot who's trying to help us out, and he's just exhausted because we as human beings have totally worn him out. We are asking for more than what we can conceive. We are pushing the limits and the boundaries of where we can actually take this technology, but we're not sitting still. So what are the new opportunities? So I like to always give things fun names if I possibly can. Systems design. You know, those of us who have been doing systems design for years, we've got to think differently. We've got to start to figure out how do we integrate these tools into our systems design and our architecture. So yes, I do think of this as both being artistry as well as technology, and I do see it as Leonardo's spawn. AI integration technicians. You know, how many of you have started out as installers? Anybody in here started out as an installer? You remember the old days when you used to come in, you get in a facility, and you know the whole goal of being an installer was how pretty can I make my cables look when it's all done? How color coordinated can I make this place look so that people know how to follow the signal? Even though you were doing it, they thought it was just pretty, and you were like, no, there's a little bit of a reasoning behind my madness. Learning how to take artificial intelligence tools and applications and understanding what their real benefit is and how they actually operate is going to be an extremely valuable skill. It's a skill right now that people are not taking advantage of. And to be honest, it's sort of like every other technology. We get new technology. Everybody believes that they can figure out how to do it. They try and do it internally. They spend a goo gobs of money, and then they come back and they find someone who's going to actually help them do it right because they've already kind of gone as far as their knowledge can actually lead them. Knowing how to integrate this technology is going to be extremely valuable, and understanding it is the way that we really have to look at this. For those of you who do on-set work, and I do miss it, which is why I do pro bono work every now and then, just to get back out there and you know, get that energy of being on the set and that family that you create for the 6 weeks or 6 months that you're working on something. Production AI engineers are going to be really key, because as these applications are changing daily and their ability is increasing daily, you need someone who's going to stay on top of that and understand how do you use this, especially when you're in the creative space of VFX. Right now, VFX is just exploding with opportunity, and you're seeing it because the use of a game engine on a live production set. 4 years ago, that was unheard of. Now, that is the way that you operate. I mean, we can look to our left here, and what they are doing here at Sheridan is teaching people what's going to actually happen and what they need to be prepared for in order to get a job in our industry now, as opposed to where we need to improve our curriculum in some of our universities so that we can prepare individuals. R&D, research and development, should never stop. As I said, as engineers, we evolve. We constantly are evolving, and we're constantly pushing the technology to evolve with us. Having individuals who understand that this is what you're really working towards is impressively increasing right now. So if you understand how to actually utilize these tools to save time in a production, you are like gold. We've all heard the adage, time is money. We've all heard that, you know, production budgets are decreasing right now. And we have all, at some point, had someone tell us that we've got to get this done because we're burning daylight or we're burning money. When you understand how much these tools can actually save you in regards to time, because I personally never tell anyone I'm going to save them money. Once you understand what you can do as far as time, that's what's really important. When you're speaking to a CFO to try and get something approved or get something moved through your budget, I would ask you, be careful when asked if you can save money, because a lot of the integration for these tools, it's not going to save you money. It is expensive. It is very expensive to run a lot of these algorithms constantly. And if you're going to use them as a part of a live production supply chain, it is going to cost you money. So understanding how you can actually save time is critical. And that's where I believe that, once again, engineers will have a wonderful place to play by educating themselves and getting ready to move into that space. Predictive AI assistants, the series of the world, those things are happening. Learning how to utilize those, but also learning how to build them for yourself so that you can actually remove some of the mundane things that you do on a daily basis. That's key. So instead of thinking about large language models, we all need to start thinking in the LoRa model. Start thinking about small, specific tasks that you can actually have these tools do for you. That removes things out of your day. That removes sort of the junk and the cloudiness, so that you can actually focus on what really needs to be done. That's a way to approach this. Code prompt engineers, I think of them as the arbiters of truth, because if you have worked with any of these tools, you understand that they do hallucinate, and hallucinations are a part of it. I use the example of when I actually put my name into ChatGPT and asked, who is Renard T. Jenkins? Well, it gave really, some things that were true, but there was one thing that I hope comes true one day, was that it said that I had an Oscar, an Academy Award. Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't, but I was laughing with some folks the other day because we were like, well, we need to figure out how to make that happen. But that's where we really do. But that's where the code prompt engineers come in, because you actually need someone who is going to check the output of this. If you've ever used it to write code, it's pretty good in writing code. However, it's not perfect. So you need people who are going to go back and check these outputs. That's another opportunity, especially if you're someone coming out of university. This would be a perfect, sort of entry-level job that we should start trying to promote within our industry, in order for us to keep the human interaction and the computer interaction together, so that we can actually keep control of what's actually happening. The one thing we don't want to do is allow systems to improve themselves and also to implement what they see as improvements, because all of these systems are built on efficiency. And as we know, efficiency usually equates to what can you remove. Over time, if we were just to say, hey, let's just let the system figure out what it's going to do and let it do it, it's going to remove something that we don't want it to remove. And that's why the human interaction, and that's why your code prompt engineers become extremely important. And I believe that if we follow sort of these things, that trained and experienced engineers will rise in the midst of all of this. And I do believe that creative technologists will rise in the midst of this as well. Those are going to be two of the areas in which, if you focus on what's actually happening and kind of get rid of all of the parlor tricks and all of the cloudiness and all of the hype that's going on, that's where we'll have the most impact as engineers. So, and then our job is to support all of these wonderful creative people. Prompt engineers, revenge of the English major. So all of those individuals who hated math in school, they now have a way of using a incredibly powerful tool simply by understanding taxonomy of language. That's really scary for those of us who are married to English majors like me. Because now they think that they can do what we do. Not really. But they can have fun. They can create an image. They can, create something that answers their emails. They can play around. but they don't understand the real infrastructure behind all of this. And once again, that's the value of engineers. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but essentially, the assistant editor is going to come back and be very, very powerful. But the assistant editor is going to be hyper charged with the use of some of these tools. How many of you started out as editors and you remember when you could like take a render break? And you could, or when things were really getting heated in the room and you kind of needed a break from the producer, and you just say, "Oh, this is going to take at least 15 minutes. I got to step out of the room. I'll be back." That's going to come back if we continue to use some of these tools, and especially once we put them into the post-production space. You're going to need to actually allow these things to generate for a little while. So for those of you who are still in the chair, you're welcome. So I talked about design and how we have to think about design a little bit differently than we do today. And so what my team and I have come up with is what we call the inclusive innovation process. Now, as engineers, we often have a wonderful idea. Some of us wake up and we're in that state between fully awake and partially asleep, and we had a dream the night before, and this is going to be the greatest tool ever, and it's going to solve all the world's problems. And we wake up and we start working on it, and we're so excited about it. And we put all of our time and effort into it, only to find out that no one cares about what we were actually building. And I say that because I've done it. One of the things that I think is really great about our people is that we have the ability to hyper-focus on a problem. And that ability to hyper-focus on that problem makes us very myopic in the way that we figure out how to actually solve it. Now, one of the things that is not so good is that when you go down that road, you often get to the point where you can't see that there may be another way to solve or to get at what that is, because you're so focused on the result and so focused on finding that one thing that you feel is going to actually do it. So one of the parts of what we call the inclusive innovation process is we have to start by inviting and hearing. It may be a problem for us, but it may not be a problem for someone else. In that case, how do we prioritize this? So start out by the inviting and hearing process. And then the other thing that we learned a long, long time ago from either our parents or our primary school teachers, we need to listen more than we speak. Simply just watch what's happening. You'd be amazed how much you can figure out about what's actually happening in a production pipeline when you step back and remove yourself from it, because when you're in it day to day, you just don't see everything that's happening. But when you step back and you just start recording all the pieces and all the processes that are a part of what's going on, you find out that there's a lot of misused time. There's a lot of chasing, things that really don't add to the solution or add to where you're trying to go. So stepping back a little bit is a big part of the process. Then you kind of say, okay, here's what I found out. You share it with who your clients are. You spend a lot of time in this space, that review and that back and forth and understanding. And then really understanding, and yes, I put in the word empathize. We don't always empathize with it. We just look at what's going on sometimes and go, these people are crazy. Why in the world are they asking me to do this? There's another way to do this. Why are they saying that I have to go this direction? But take a moment, put ourselves in their shoes, try and really feel why they want to do something. Then you can get back to educating them why what they're trying to do is crazy. But you've got to put yourself in those shoes. And then you share your design back and forth, and you really want to get them to give you feedback and keep that improvement going. And then you work towards the integration. You work towards the deployment and the implement. The thing about integration is you have to battle between adoption and adaption. A lot of people don't get the difference between the two. Adoption is, okay, yeah, I'm going to put this in, I've been forced to do this and it's here and I got to deal with it. Adaption is when you get buy-in and they're like, hey, wait a minute, I can change some of the things that I'm doing so that this actually grows with me as a product. And this grows with me and I can understand how to work closer with the engineering department so that we can make this a better tool. We should all be seeking adoption at the beginning with the intent of getting to adaption. Then we get into the rules of Kaizen, which requires that you continually improve. And that's something that on the engineering side, we haven't really paid a lot of attention to. We've all, heard of waterfall. We've talked about agile. We've talked about all of these things that are really wonderful IT business rules and processes and so forth. But Kaizen, which if you don't know, was something that Toyota put in place, decades ago. And people were trying to figure out, why are the Toyota factories so efficient? Why are they able to turn out so many cars per day? Well, that was because they were working with everyone, from the person who swept the floor to the person who actually tightened the final nut on the door of the car before it left the assembly line. They worked with each individual along that entire supply chain to figure out, how can we improve what you do every day? That's the part where we have to think about design a little bit differently. And that also leans into our engineering superpower, where we don't have to stop evolving. We can continue to improve every single thing that we're working on, as long as we're following that supply chain and speaking to each one of the members of that supply chain and figuring out, how can I improve that particular thing? And once I figure out how it improves that thing, where do I actually tie that in to the larger supply chain and the larger architecture? Because sometimes you may improve something for one, but it doesn't really integrate in to the overall problem that you're trying to solve. So you've got to continue to do that. And if you notice, this is cyclical. It never stops. So that is why we really use this as part of the way that we design at I2A2. So, a few things for those of you who are managers and leaders, a few things to keep in mind. The way that you approach this inclusion and this innovation, especially when you're on a creative leadership team. And whether you realize it or not, if you are an engineer in media and entertainment, you are a creative leader, because you're put in a position to have to be creative in the way that you solve and solution for everything, whether you are on a live set or whether you're working in an R&D lab. So using the technology to kind of jumpstart the creative process, that's one of the most fun things that you can do as a leader. You come into a situation and you ask a question. I like to ask the question, if I give you 2 single rod connectors and I give you 4 rods, how do you put them all together? And remember, there's 2 single rod that you can only use the connectors once. How do you put all of that together? Most people look at me just like you all are like, wait a minute, you can't do that. You only have 2 connectors, but I've got 4 rods. How do I do that? The answer to the question is, I never said that you couldn't ask me for some more rods. That's a creative way of thinking. We don't always go into problems thinking in that manner. So throwing things out there like that, playing, all of us, we used to play as kids. And through that play, we found out things. I played with keys, and I loved even as a kid, the action or the art of driving. I put those keys into an electrical socket, and I learned very quickly that is something that I need to be careful with. It's probably why I don't have hair now. Uh, but the other thing is using tech to sort of fan the flames, really fanning the flames when your team kind of centers around something. And all of a sudden you see that energy where everybody's like working together trying to figure something out. We need to encourage that. We need to encourage that individuals don't forget how to play. Work can be work, but when you incorporate play, it doesn't seem as much like work. Then we got to learn how to kind of put some guardrails around it. Got to learn how to contain it. Because sometimes you have that one person on the team who's got the best, biggest, brightest idea, and they just start running. And all of a sudden, they're running here, and the rest of the team is running here. So you've got to make sure that as leaders, we're putting some guardrails around this. This is the only way that we're going to actually keep a lot of what we are seeing as far as advancements in technology in control and actually working towards good. And then we get back to what I talked about, the adoption and adaption. Pay attention to your deployments. Pay attention to the usage of your tools. Help guide individuals away from using them in a manner that is not necessarily best. So integrity and innovation and implementation. Many of you have heard in my bio, in all things integrity and integrity in all things. That is what I taught my daughters. That is what my wife and I agreed to. And that is how I lead my company and any of the teams that I have ever had the pleasure and been blessed to lead. As we put all of these tools together, we do understand that currently the models are only good as the people who build them. And if they're only good as the people who build them, they may have bias involved in them. So, one of the things I like to talk about when I talk about bias is I like for individuals to understand not all bias is bad. I have a bias to putting a key into an electrical socket. That's a good thing. I learned a lesson. I also have a bias to putting my hand on the stove. Luckily, I didn't do that. But that's a good bias. And when you put that type of bias into your projects, that actually has a positive outcome. I will share with you that the initial, we built a synthetic human it's been about 3.5 years ago at the beginning of all of this stuff. And we trained that human on the open internet, or what I like to call the dirty net. You know, just we trained it. Within 4 hours of training, just wide open internet, that synthetic human became the most misogynistic, racist thing that we had ever seen, and we unplugged it at that point. And we said, okay, now we've learned that lesson. What we now have to do is figure out how do we actually build in bias away from those types of things, because if we're going to release this out to the world to interact with, we need it to actually be open to interacting with all people of our world. So we started to understand how we needed to really start to cleanse the data and work towards making sure that our data set was performing in the way that we want to. Now, with that same skill, you can build good or you can build bad. So keep in mind when you talk about the idea of bias, understand that it is more than just, oh, bias is bad. No, there is good bias, and we need to make sure, thinking about it like a negative prompt. Ethics. How do we design with ethics in mind? I simply say, if you're building something and you're building it for use by human beings, make sure that it is good. Who's responsible? We're responsible. The human beings are still in control of this technology and we need to make sure that human beings continue to be in control. And we do see progress in all of that, as you see a lot of the companies sort of coming together to figure out how do we do what's good and what's not harmful. And finally, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. We've all been there. And so implementing tech for good was something that will hopefully keep us from coming to a situation like this. So last year at IBC, we did a series of seminars that were surrounding the idea of tech for good. We had people who wanted to talk about the competitive edge that you can get with all of these tools. And that was a very interesting conversation because individuals were coming up with all kinds of ways that we can use artificial intelligence to make our lives better, but also to give them, at their particular jobs, a manner in which they could actually use it to move forward and to get ahead of what they consider to be the competition. The other side was, ethics and the responsibility of what's actually happening in artificial intelligence. That is something that we hope to bring back next year, or bring back this year, and we're working towards seeing if we can get some of those conversations going. But if you have the opportunity to attend IBC, come and join us. If you don't have the ability to join IBC, look around your communities and see if there are ways for you to connect with other people who are really looking to build tech for good. Finally, I'd like to leave you with 6 things that we need to keep in mind. The most important thing and the fuel of all of this technology that we have in front of us is data. Data is the most important tool. That is the new currency. Unfortunately, some of us have already given away a lot of our data by signing some of the application fine print without actually reading it. We've given companies the authority to use and disseminate our data in any way they see fit. And in some cases, in perpetuity, in all known and unknown technologies, for here and the universe as a whole. I did not make that up. That is actually in the fine print of a particular application that I'm not going to mention. That is why it becomes very important for us to understand how to own our own data, how to access our data, how to really utilize our data for our benefit. How do we regain control? How do we understand how to protect it? And then once we understand all of that, the truth is, how do we optimize it so that we are the benefactors of using our data? And then how do we actively integrate it into our daily lives? Well, you're kind of already doing that, but you've given away control. So now we got to work and reverse engineer that and get us back to where we belong. With that, I hope to end with believing this quote. And all of you are skilled. I'm not going to read it, but this is what I believe that we need to actually be doing. And this is where we have the most important thing. This is where we play. Whether you are a vendor, whether you are an engineer working within a production house or within a broadcast facility, whether you are a student, this is where we play. Finally, I want to get us from here to here. And that is an AI image that was generated using my baby picture. I want to get us, trust me, I can show you a picture of me in high school that would blow your mind. It was a big afro. But I want us to be armored. I want us to be ready. I want us to be educated. I want us to walk into this without fear. I want us to be the leaders in the space, That's what's most important. So with that, we are I2A2. I'm Renard Jenkins. I'm your SMPTE president for the next 6 months. And then I go into the past president role, but I'll still be around. So thank you all for having me. And I really and truly appreciate all that you guys are doing here. And the fact that I missed the barbecue last night, I'm kind of upset about. Have a great day, and I'm looking forward to it.